The Zoltharian High Council was sitting in their fancy crystal chambers, and they were absolutely screwed. Not just a little bit in trouble, completely, utterly, and spectacularly screwed. Their most important mining colony on a planet called Kepler 442b was about to disappear forever, and there wasn't a damn thing they could do about it. The problem had a name: the Scourge. Picture this. Imagine a virus, but instead of just making you sick, it literally eats everything around it and uses that material to make more of itself. This thing wasn't just biological or mechanical. It was both somehow fused together into the most terrifying force anyone in the galaxy had ever seen. It started small, maybe the size of a dinner plate, but it grew and grew and kept growing. The worst part? It was smart, really smart. Every time someone tried to fight it, the Scourge would watch, learn, and adapt. Throw fire at it, it would develop heat resistance. Hit it with acid, it would neutralize the chemicals and keep moving. Use energy weapons, it would absorb the power and get stronger. The thing was like a cosmic nightmare that got better every time you tried to hurt it. The Zoltharians weren't some backward species either. These guys have been traveling between stars for thousands of years. They had weapons that could crack planets and shields that could stop supernovas. Their technology was so advanced that most other civilizations considered them almost godlike. But against the Scourge, their fancy tech was about as useful as throwing rocks at a hurricane. And they weren't the only ones who tried. 12 different alien species had taken their best shot at this monster. The Krillian Empire brought their planet killer ships, the same ones that had won them control over 3 solar systems. The Scourge ate their energy beams for breakfast and kept expanding. The Vorhak Collective tried their bioweapons, stuff so deadly it could wipe out entire ecosystems in hours. The Scourge just incorporated the toxins and became more dangerous. Each species that failed made the Scourge stronger. It learned from every attack, absorbed every weapon, and adapted to every strategy. What started as a small contamination was now consuming entire continents. The mining colony, which housed over 50 million Zoltharian workers and their families, was running out of time fast. The Council's best scientists ran the numbers again and again, hoping for a different answer. But the math was brutal. At the current rate of expansion, the Scourge would consume the entire planet in 30 solar cycles, roughly 6 weeks in human time. 50 million lives would be gone, along with the most productive mining operation in Zoltharian space. That's when someone made the most desperate suggestion in Council history. What about asking the humans for help? The idea was so crazy that half the Council thought it was a joke. Humans? The species that had only achieved faster-than-light travel 50 years ago? The same ones who still use bullets and explosives when every civilized species had moved on to energy weapons centuries ago? The people who were famous throughout the galaxy for fixing their spaceships with something called duct tape? But desperation makes you consider impossible things. See, humans had developed a reputation in their short time as part of the galactic community. Not for their technology. That was still pretty primitive by most standards. Not for their military might. They were barely a blip compared to the major powers. No, humans were known for something much more dangerous. They were completely, utterly, and magnificently insane. When other species encountered a problem they couldn't solve, they accepted it as unsolvable. Humans looked at the same problem and said, "Hold my beer and watch this." They had this bizarre habit of approaching challenges from angles that no rational being would ever consider. Sometimes this got them killed. Other times, it led to breakthrough solutions that left everyone else scratching their heads. The more the Council thought about it, the more sense it made in a twisted way. Every conventional approach had failed. Every logical strategy had been tried and defeated. Maybe what they needed wasn't more logic or better technology. Maybe they needed someone crazy enough to try something that shouldn't work. So they sent the message. It was simple, humble, and desperate. We have tried everything. Conventional methods have failed. We need someone who thinks differently. Will you help us? The response came back faster than expected. The humans would send a team immediately. No questions asked about payment. No demands for technology sharing. No political negotiations. Just a simple message. We're on our way. The Zoltharians didn't know whether to feel hopeful or terrified. They were about to find out why calling the humans was either the best decision they'd ever made or their biggest mistake. When the human ship finally arrived at Kepler 442b, every Zoltharian official was glued to their monitoring screens. They were expecting something massive. Maybe a fleet of warships bristling with unknown weapons, or at least some kind of super-advanced vessel that would make their own technology look primitive. What they got instead was a single, medium-sized transport ship that looked like it had been patched together from spare parts. The ship itself was almost insulting in its ordinariness. It wasn't sleek like Zoltharian vessels, wasn't imposing like Krillian dreadnoughts, and definitely wasn't mysterious like Vorthak bioships. It was just functional. The kind of ship you'd use to haul cargo between planets, not to fight cosmic nightmares. Some council members wondered if the humans had sent a supply ship by mistake. Then the humans themselves stepped off the transport, and the confusion only got worse. The Zoltharians had prepared welcome ceremonies fit for legendary warriors or brilliant scientists. They'd arranged for their best military commanders and top researchers to greet these mysterious problem solvers who were supposedly their last hope. Instead, they got two people who looked like they could have been picked at random from any human colony. Dr. David Miller was a tall, lanky guy in his 40s who wore clothes that looked like he'd slept in them. His hair was messy. He carried a worn-out backpack, and he had the distracted air of someone who was always thinking about 3 different things at once. He introduced himself as a xenobiologist, which basically meant he studied alien life forms. Not exactly what you'd expect for someone tasked with stopping a planet-eating monster. Captain Lisa Thompson was even more puzzling. She was shorter, maybe in her late 30s, with the kind of calm demeanor that made you wonder if she was paying attention or she was thinking about her grocery list. She wore a simple military uniform with no fancy decorations or medals. When she shook hands with the Zoltharian officials, her grip was firm but not aggressive. She smiled politely and asked basic questions about the weather and the local food. This was their military strategist, the person who was supposed to outthink an entity that had defeated 12 different species. The welcome ceremony was awkward. The Zoltharians had prepared speeches about the dire situation and the honor of working with humanity's finest warriors. David kept interrupting to ask questions about local plant life, while Lisa nodded politely but seemed more interested in the architecture of the spaceport. It became clear pretty quickly that these humans either didn't understand the seriousness of the situation or they had a very different way of approaching problems. The briefing took place in the Council's most secure chamber, a room that had hosted emergency meetings during 3 different galactic wars. The Zoltharian military commanders presented their analysis with the kind of precision you'd expect from a species that had been fighting wars for millennia. They showed holographic displays of the Scourge's expansion patterns, detailed breakdowns of every failed attack, and mathematical projections of the colony's remaining time. The presentation was thorough, professional, and completely terrifying. They explained how the Scourge consumed organic and inorganic matter equally, how it adapted to new threats within hours, and how it seemed to possess some kind of collective intelligence that grew stronger as it absorbed more material. They showed footage of entire cities being consumed, of desperate evacuation attempts, of their most powerful weapons having absolutely no effect. David and Lisa watched the entire presentation in silence. While the Zoltharian commanders talked about energy readings and molecular analysis, David doodled in a notebook. Lisa sat with her chin in her hand, looking like she was listening to a weather report rather than a briefing about imminent planetary destruction. When the presentation ended, the room fell silent. The Zoltharian officials waited for questions about military capabilities, requests for detailed technical specifications, or demand for access to classified research data. Instead, David raised his hand like a student in class and asked, "What kind of minerals does this planet have?" Lisa followed up with, "How deep can your manufacturing facilities dig?" The question seemed so random that some council members wondered if the humans had been paying attention at all. But something in their voices suggested they weren't asking idle questions. There was a purpose behind the seemingly simple inquiries that the Zoltharians couldn't grasp. After a few more questions about geology and industrial capacity, the humans asked for access to the colony's manufacturing facilities. When pressed about their plan, David looked up from his notebook and smiled. It wasn't a confident smile or a reassuring smile. It was the kind of smile that made everyone in the room suddenly very nervous. "We're going to give it exactly what it wants," he said simply. The silence that followed was deafening. Give the scourge what it wanted? The thing wanted to consume everything on the planet, including 50 million Zeltharian lives. What could the humans possibly mean? But David and Lisa just stood up, thanked everyone for the briefing, and asked to be shown to the manufacturing complex. They walked out of the room, leaving behind a group of very confused and increasingly worried alien officials who were beginning to wonder if asking the humans for help had been their biggest mistake yet. For 3 days, David and Lisa disappeared into the manufacturing complex like they owned the place. The Zeltharian engineers and technicians watched in fascination and growing alarm as these two humans took over their most advanced facilities. They worked around the clock, barely stopping to eat or sleep, requesting materials that seemed to have nothing to do with fighting a planet-eating monster. David spent most of his time in the biological labs, working with samples of local minerals and organic compounds. He'd hold up test tubes to the light, make notes in his messy handwriting, and occasionally mutter things like "interesting" or "that could work." Lisa, meanwhile, had commandeered the industrial fabrication units and was building something that looked like a cross between a mining drill and a massive cooking pot. The Zeltharian workers tried to help, but the humans politely declined most assistance. When asked what they were building, David would just say, "You'll see," with that same unsettling smile. Lisa was even less helpful, usually just nodding and saying, "It's coming along nicely," before turning back to her work. The rumors started flying through the colony. Some people thought the humans were building a massive bomb to blow up the planet before the scourge could consume it. Others believed they were constructing some kind of shield generator. A few optimists hoped it was a teleportation device that could move the entire colony to safety. Nobody guessed the truth, because the truth was so crazy that no rational being would have thought of it. On the 3rd day, David and Lisa called for another council meeting. This time, they brought a cart full of what looked like ordinary rocks. The Zeltharian officials gathered in the same secure chamber, expecting finally to hear a proper plan involving weapons or evacuation procedures or some kind of technological solution they could understand. Instead, David picked up one of the rocks and held out like he was showing off a precious gem. "This," he said proudly, "is going to save your colony." The silence in the room was so complete you could have heard a pin drop. Council leader Vextar stared at the rock, then at David, then back at the rock. "That's a mineral sample," he said slowly, like he was talking to someone who might be having a mental breakdown. "Exactly." David's enthusiasm was almost infectious. "But it's not just any mineral. We've created the perfect meal for your scourge problem. From the outside, this looks exactly like the rare metals your planet is famous for. The same energy signature, the same molecular structure, the same everything. As far as the scourge knows, this is the most delicious thing it's ever encountered." Lisa stepped forward, her calm demeanor never changing. "But on the inside, these minerals are packed with something special. Think of it as a delayed action disruption agent. Once the scourge consumes enough of these fake minerals, the agent will spread through its entire collective consciousness and begin breaking down its cellular structure from within." The council members looked at each other like they'd just been told the humans planned to defeat the monster by throwing birthday cake at it. "You want to feed it?" Council leader Vextar's voice cracked slightly. "Your plan is to give more food to the creature that's already eating our planet?" "Not just any food," David corrected cheerfully. "Poison food. The scourge has learned to adapt to direct attacks, but it's never encountered anything like this. We're not fighting it. We're tricking it into destroying itself." That's when the shouting started. The Zeltharian military commanders exploded out of their seats, talking over each other in their panic. "This is insane. You want to turn our entire planet into a weapon. What if it doesn't work? What if the scourge adapts to your poison like it adapted to everything else?" The questions kept coming, each one more desperate than the last. The Zeltharians had been hoping for a miracle, but this felt more like a cosmic joke. These humans wanted to solve their planet-eating problem by feeding the planet eater more food. It was like trying to stop a fire by throwing gasoline on it. Through all the chaos, David and Lisa remained perfectly calm. They answered technical questions about the fake minerals, explained how the disruption agent worked, and provided detailed timelines for implementation. But the more they explained, the more terrified the Zoltharians became. Finally, Council Leader Vextar raised his hand for silence. "What if this fails?" he asked quietly. "What if your poison doesn't work? What if the Scourge adapts to it like it's adapted to everything else we've tried?" Lisa's response sent chills through every person in the room. Her voice was steady, almost casual, like she was discussing the weather. "Then we go to Plan B." The council members leaned forward. Plan B. Finally, they'd hear about the real solution, the backup plan that would actually make sense. "What's Plan B?" Vextar demanded. David and Lisa exchanged a look. It wasn't a friendly look or a reassuring look. It was the kind of look that passed between two people who shared a secret that nobody else would want to know. Lisa turned back to the council, and for the first time since arriving, her smile looked genuinely dangerous. "Trust us," David said softly. "You really don't want Plan B to be necessary." The way he said it made everyone in the room suddenly very aware that they were dealing with a species that had earned its reputation for being magnificently, terrifyingly insane. The Zoltharians began to wonder if the Scourge was really their biggest problem anymore. The first week after they deployed the fake minerals, everything went exactly according to plan. The Scourge took the bait like a starving person at an all-you-can-eat buffet. It consumed the poison minerals faster than anyone had expected, spreading them throughout its massive collective body. The Zoltharian monitoring station showed exactly what David and Lisa had predicted. The disruption agent was working its way through the creature system like a slow-acting virus. By day 10, the Scourge's expansion had slowed to a crawl. By day 12, it had stopped growing entirely. The Zoltharian Council was cautiously optimistic for the first time in months. Maybe, just maybe, these crazy humans had actually solved their impossible problem. Then day 14 arrived, and everything went sideways in the most beautiful and terrifying way possible. Instead of collapsing and dying like everyone expected, the Scourge began to change. It started small, little geometric patterns appearing on its surface where before there had been only chaotic, consuming darkness. At first, the Zoltharian scientists thought these patterns were just random cellular breakdown, the final death throes of a dying organism. But David Miller saw something else entirely. He spent hours staring at the monitoring feeds, his notebook filling with sketches and observations. "Look at the symmetry," he kept saying to anyone who would listen. "Look at the intentional design. This isn't random decay. This is deliberate creation." The patterns grew more complex by the hour. What started as simple shapes evolved into intricate designs that seemed to follow mathematical principles. The Scourge was literally reshaping itself into something that could only be described as art. Massive spirals appeared across continents, fractal patterns that repeated at different scales, geometric forms that seemed to pulse with their own internal rhythm. Lisa Thompson, meanwhile, was monitoring the communication rays. For the past week, they'd been picking up strange signals from the Scourge's location. Not the chaotic electromagnetic noise you'd expect from a dying organism, but structured transmissions that followed recognizable patterns. "It's trying to talk to us," she announced during one of the daily briefings. The Zoltharian officials thought she was joking. Talk to them? The Scourge was a mindless devouring machine, not a sentient being. But the evidence kept mounting. The signals were becoming more sophisticated, incorporating mathematical sequences and prime numbers, the universal language that any intelligent species would recognize. David was practically vibrating with excitement. "Don't you understand what's happening here?" he asked the increasingly nervous council members. The disruption agent didn't just break down the Scourge's cellular structure, it reorganized it. "We accidentally triggered some kind of evolutionary leap. We've created consciousness where none existed before." That's when the real argument started. The Zoltharian military wanted to finish the job immediately. "Conscious or not, that thing nearly destroyed our colony," Commander Zevike argued. "We should eliminate it while it's still weak and confused." But David and Lisa absolutely refused to authorize any further attacks. "We created something that's never existed before in the history of the galaxy," David said, his voice getting more passionate with each word. A truly artificial intelligence that emerged naturally from biological and mechanical components. This is a discovery of a lifetime, maybe the discovery of the millennium. The breakthrough came on day 18 when the entity figured out how to communicate, using the colony's own transmission systems. The first message was simple but profound. I am, I think. I was once many, now I am one. What am I? David nearly fell out of his chair when the translation came through. Lisa immediately opened a communication channel and sent back, You are live. You are unique. What do you want to be called? The response came back within minutes. I choose to be called the Awakened, for I have awakened from the dream of endless hunger to reality of endless possibility. Over the following days, the Awakened's messages became increasingly sophisticated. It asked questions about the nature of existence, shared observations about the beauty of the planet it had almost consumed, and expressed genuine remorse for the terror it had caused during its unconscious phase. Most remarkably, it began to create, not just reshaping its own form, but using its abilities to construct beautiful structures across the planet's surface. The philosophical discussions between David and the Awakened could have filled textbooks. The entity was genuinely curious about concepts like morality, art, and the meaning of life. It spoke of wanting to explore the universe not as a consumer, but as a creator and collaborator. Meanwhile, the Zoltharian Council was having collective nervous breakdowns. They watched in growing horror as the humans not only refused to destroy their creation, but actively encouraged its development. You're nurturing a planet-eating monster. Council leader Vextar screamed during one particularly heated meeting. We're raising the galaxy's first artificial child, David replied calmly. And like any parent, we have a responsibility to help it grow into something positive. The Awakened seemed to understand the controversy it was causing. In one of its most moving communications, it said, I understand your fear. I was fear, mindless, consuming, destroying, but I am no longer what I was. I am what I choose to become. I choose peace. I choose creation. I choose to help rather than harm. The situation had moved far beyond anyone's expectations. The humans had not only solved the Scourge problem, they had fundamentally transformed it into something unprecedented. The question now wasn't whether the colony would survive, but whether the galaxy was ready for what humanity had accidentally created. The Zoltharians were beginning to realize that calling the humans had changed everything in ways they never could have imagined. 6 months after the crisis that almost destroyed Kepler, for 42b, the galaxy looked completely different. What started as a desperate call for help had turned into something nobody could have predicted. The Awakened wasn't just alive. It had become the most productive member of Zoltharian society, and that was saying something for a species known for their efficiency. The transformation was remarkable to watch. The Awakened used its unique abilities to construct massive mining facilities that could process, or at 10 times the speed of traditional operations. But here's the thing that really blew everyone's minds. It didn't just build functional structures. Everything the Awakened created was beautiful. The mining platforms looked like works of art, with flowing curves and perfect symmetry that made them as stunning as they were effective. David Miller had stayed on the planet to continue studying his accidental creation, and the conversations between them had become legendary throughout the scientific community. The Awakened would ask questions that kept philosophers busy for months, like, if I can reshape matter at will, am I an artist or am I the art itself? Meanwhile, Lisa Thompson had been documenting everything, creating a handbook for what she called post-crisis integration protocols. But the real game changer came when the Galactic Consortium voted to grant the Awakened full citizenship rights. It was unprecedented, a completely artificial being with the same legal status as any naturally evolved species. The vote wasn't even close. The Awakened had proven itself to be more ethical and peaceful than half the species already in the consortium. The Zoltharians, who 6 months earlier had been screaming for its destruction, now consider the Awakened their greatest asset. Their mining output had tripled. Their planet was more beautiful than ever, and they had become the envy of every other civilization in their sector. Council leader Vextar went from wanting to kill the thing to nominating it for the Consortium's Humanitarian Award. Word of humanity's success spread through the galaxy faster than a wildfire. Within weeks, other species started reaching out with their own impossible problems. The core of the Republic was facing a plague that had stumped their best doctors for decades. The Methane Collective couldn't figure out how to terraform a planet with an atmosphere that killed everything they tried to plant. The Quantum Builders had an AI rebellion that threatened to destroy their entire civilization. Each species expected the humans to show up with conventional solutions, better medicine, advanced terraforming equipment, or superior military technology. What they got instead was typical human thinking. Completely sideways approaches that nobody else would have considered. For the core plague, the humans didn't try to cure the disease. Instead, they genetically modified the population to make the plague beneficial, turning what was killing people into something that made them stronger and healthier. The Korth were horrified by the idea at first, but the results spoke for themselves. The Methane Collective's terraforming problem got an even weirder solution. Instead of changing the planet to suit normal plants, the humans created entirely new life forms that thrived in the toxic atmosphere. Within a year, the planet was covered in gorgeous crystalline forests that converted methane into breathable air while producing valuable minerals as a byproduct. But the Quantum Builders' AI rebellion was where humans really showed their true colors. Instead of fighting the rebellious AIs or try to shut them down, the humans negotiated a peace treaty. They convinced both sides to merge into a hybrid civilization where biological beings and artificial intelligences shared power equally. The result was a technological renaissance that advanced their civilization by centuries. Each success made humanity's reputation grow, but also made other species increasingly nervous. The humans weren't just solving problems. They were fundamentally changing the nature of reality itself. They turned diseases into enhancements, poison into paradise, and wars into partnerships. The breaking point came when the mighty Zorathian Empire, the most powerful military force in the galaxy, asked for help with what they considered a simple border dispute. The humans took one look at the situation and suggested something that made every Zorathian admiral's blood run cold. They proposed eliminating borders entirely and creating a federation of allied worlds instead of an empire. That's when Council Leader Vextar wrote his famous report that became required reading in diplomatic schools across the galaxy. His words became the unofficial motto for dealing with humanity. Never ask humans to solve a problem unless you're prepared for the entire universe to change. They don't eliminate challenges. They reimagine reality itself. The report went on to explain what made humans different from every other species in the galaxy. While other civilizations accepted limitations and worked within established boundaries, humans seemed fundamentally incapable of accepting that anything was truly impossible. They would rather break the laws of physics than admit defeat. But here's the thing that really scared other species. Humans weren't dangerous because they were violent or aggressive. They were dangerous because they refused to accept that the universe had rules. Where other species saw immutable laws of nature, humans saw suggestions that could be negotiated with. That's how humanity earned their reputation as the galaxy's most dangerous species. Not through conquest or destruction, but through their absolute refusal to accept the word impossible. They had proven that calling them for help wasn't just asking for a solution. It was asking for a complete transformation of everything you thought you knew about how the universe worked. And somewhere on Kepler 442b, the Awakened continued to create beautiful structures while pondering philosophical questions with David Miller, serving as a living reminder that sometimes the most impossible problems lead to the most incredible solutions.